Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Coresight Conversation Innovator Intelligence. We are pleased to have David Sobie, co-founder of Happy Returns, here with us today, and Stephen Winnick as our moderator.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today for our 30-minute conversation. We have a great session planned ahead with CEO and co-founder of Happy Returns, David Sobie. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to join, so we'll start in about 2 or 3 minutes or so. And while everyone's joining, we're going to be launching some poll questions about 10 minutes into the discussion. We encourage everyone to participate and engage in those questions, the Q&A, as well as, there's at the bottom of your webinar, screen, there's a Q&A function to ask questions. Please, we encourage all of the attendees to ask questions, engage with us during our discussions, and we'll try to address them either throughout our conversation or if there's time at the end after our discussion concludes. Okay, great. Let's get started. So I'm Stephen Winnick, and I lead Coresight's partnerships for high growth retail technology focused companies. Today, I am proud to announce that I'm joined by Happy Returns CEO and co-founder David Sobie. Happy Returns is a comprehensive return solution for both online and omni-channel retailers. Prior to Happy Returns, David was Chief Marketing Officer at Revolve, leading all online and offline marketing, branding, acquisition, and business development. We have an exciting conversation ahead for today's session. And just to kick things off, I'll let David discuss what was his inspiration behind Happy Returns and tell us a little bit more about the inspiration for finding the company and his background. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to David.
Thanks, Stephen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So thanks for the intro. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Happy Returns. And for those that are listening that are maybe not familiar with the company, you may have guessed from our name that we're tackling the painful challenge of returning products purchased online. So just to quickly explain who we are, and then I can tell a little bit about how we got into this business. We are a return software and reverse logistics business. We're based in Santa Monica, California. We're venture funded. We've been around for about 5 years, and we employ about 100 people across our headquarters in Santa Monica and our 2 return hub processing facilities. We have one on the East Coast in Eastern Pennsylvania and one on the West Coast out here in the LA area. And we work with dozens of leading and emerging brands. So companies like Revolve, companies like Rothy's and Everlane and Steve Madden, Untuckit, Parachute Home. And they use our software to power the online return and exchange flows on their website. What we're known for primarily in the market is our in-person return bar network. So this is a place where shoppers from those brands can have an easy in-person return process as though they were going to a store in markets where these retailers have no stores. And then they use our reverse logistics capabilities to save money on the cost of returns. So that's the business in a nutshell. The way I got into this business, about a decade ago, I met my partner, Mark Geller. We were both working at a flash sale retailer here in LA called Hotelook. If you know the Hotelook story, Hotelook ended up getting purchased by Nordstrom. And so I was leading the marketing team, Mark was leading the mobile team, and one of the programs that we worked on together after the acquisition was letting Hotelook shoppers buy online and return to Nordstrom Rack stores. And the insights that we gained working on that program are what led to founding the company. And so in really simple terms, Return to Rack, as the program was known, ended up being a great initiative for everyone involved. Shoppers got what they want in returns, which is the ability to walk into a store and hand their goods to someone and get an immediate refund or exchange. Nordstrom Rack got tons of new foot traffic, Hotelook shoppers walking in the door. And so we started the company with this simple premise of, can we replicate this case study that we built for buy on Hotelook, return to Nordstrom Rack, and can we bring buy online, return to store for retailers that don't have stores? And so that was the premise 5 years ago. today it's really software and reverse logistics. And, as I described, we operate at scale today.
Great. That's super helpful. And, just a question while you were telling that, the story behind it. You have over, what did you say, 700 return bars across the nation where shoppers can go and return their items with anyone in your partnership network.
Correct.
So, of course, I got to bring up the situation of COVID. So how are you working with retailers and brands today to, help them facilitate this returns process? I mean, e-commerce sales are accelerating now even quicker than we had projected. So what is Happy Returns doing, I guess, on the software side to help their partner network, combat the increased online sales, which usually would lead to increased returns?
Yeah, great question. So obviously the world is different right now. And, the biggest impact to our business, is just this closing of non-essential retail. And so for us and for our retail partners, what that means is if they have stores, those stores are closed. And our return bar network, which operates inside of stores and inside of malls and inside of other businesses, is also temporarily closed. And so we've sort of taken 2 steps back in e-commerce. Now the only option to return is via the mail. And so it's a little bit like, we're going back to the Stone Age where people have to print labels and deal with boxes and tape things up and find a drop box or an open carrier location to do returns. And so as you point out, that's one major impact. The second is that there's this acceleration of e-commerce. Mm-hmm. But what we've observed, and this is primarily, I think, a function of the categories that we work in, apparel, footwear, accessories, is that, while there has been an increase in online shopping, it's been, over-indexing to the sort of essential categories. Those things like grocery, food delivery, areas that we work in, apparel, footwear, really have seen a hit. And so when there are fewer people ordering in those categories, there are fewer returns. And so we've seen this kind of double whammy of, the shift to, the core thing that we do to operate with regard to in-person returns being closed, and then just fewer returns out there. So where we are spending our time and where we are spending our energy is really on the software side. And the software side for us is all about powering the returns portals of retailer websites. And for the orders that are happening that end up with returns, really using our software to intelligently promote exchanges. So, I'm returning this shirt because it's too small. Our software will help the retailer say, well, gosh, if this shirt is available in the next size up, let's make sure we put it in front of David and make it as simple as possible for him to say yes. And so really it's been about trying to remove friction on the front end and trying to promote exchanges, because obviously the benefit of an exchange versus a return is that the retailers get to keep the money. And more so now than ever, I think retailers are thinking about survival, and survival means cutting costs. And so anything that can be done to help retain more revenue and not have returns happen is great. And so really our focus has been about the software side, and then secondarily, because we aggregate returns for all of our customers, we end up with very attractive shipping rates. And so trying to extend those shipping rates to our retail partners, is also, I think, a big driver of cost savings right now and something that's very attractive.
Can you go into the shipping rates a bit more for the audience?
Yeah, so, as I described at the outset, we provide software and reverse logistics, and our reverse logistics is done through common carriers, primarily through FedEx, and we ship a lot of stuff, right? So, all of those in-person return bars end up shipping goods to our hubs. We also manage the returns by mail for dozens of different retailers, meaning, shipped from the consumer straight to one of our processing hubs. And because we aggregate that shipping, we were able to achieve, lower carrier rates than an individual retailer could receive on their own. And it's just the power of, purchasing in bulk, essentially. And so we're able to extend those rates and say, hey, take a look at the Happy Returns shipping rate card versus your own. There may be cost savings opportunity for you. And the nice thing about those savings is it's instant, right? In many cases, they're not changing anything. It's just which shipping account are we printing labels from, and that savings drops immediately to the bottom line.
Yeah, as an analyst, the cost savings are clear. We had a discussion about this last week. Is there anything, you would say you point out that retailers don't understand necessarily about returns, either from a pre-COVID or current COVID, environment? Some of the, underlying themes around, what are some of the areas that you think that retailers don't understand about the nature of returns or cost savings, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. I think the piece which is really misunderstood with returns is, and part of this is the notion of post-purchase, right? People think about returns as something that is after the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is returns are not just about post-purchase. They impact so much upstream, right? And the reason why I think no one can ignore this problem anymore is that it has huge impact on who shops your website, has a huge impact on who checks out, an enormous impact on whether a shopper that you potentially paid to acquire ever shops with you again. And so to unpack those a little bit, and there's all kinds of stats, and if anyone is interested, we have plenty of resources on our website in our blog section that sort of talk about these. But something like 55% of shoppers have reported that they will avoid buying certain things online because of the anticipated hassle of returning. There's an oft-quoted study that says over 80% of shoppers will check a retailer's return policy before they check out. Why? Well, because they're trying to anticipate, like, hey, if this doesn't fit, or if this item that I bought on a very small phone screen, if it doesn't look the way it did when I get it and I try it on, how painful is this going to be for me? And then finally, I talked about this before, but this massive impact on customer retention, right? And there's dozens of studies about this that all reach the same conclusion, which is that if a shopper buys something from you and have a bad experience returning it, they're never coming back to shop again, right?
Right.
And in an environment where customer acquisition costs are going through the roof because everyone is competing for the same shopper through the same channels, you just cannot afford to lose customers through this. And so, back to your question, I think the biggest misperception or thing that people don't understand is just how much of an impact this sliver of post-purchase has upstream in the funnel.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And as you were speaking, we had a few questions come in from the audience. And it was really about, you mentioned the customer experience could lead to higher customer retention, which makes a lot of sense. So we had a question come in, what is the average rate of returns for a D2C apparel retailer as a percent of sales versus a legacy retailer? So, historically, I mean, we've seen D2C companies probably operate, probably a little more lean and agile when it comes to returns, but legacies had to adjust and stay competitive with the likes of Amazon. So I guess, what's your comment on the difference between the D2C versus legacy, and what are some tactics that you've seen from each side in terms of, customer experience?
Yeah. I mean, so to frame my answer, when I think about legacy, I think about folks that usually started with physical stores and then migrated online, and D2C as someone that started online. And I'll admit that the lines have gotten very blurry, right?
Right. Right. With the online going offline as well.
Yeah, which is, we could have a whole other webinar about that topic. But I mean, the sort of oft quoted and what our research has found is that pure play online return rates tend to be 3 to 4 times higher than brick and mortar stores. And it's just the simple limitations of shopping online. I can't see it, I can't try it on. Wow, I got this at home and it doesn't look as good on me as it did on the highly photoshopped model online, right? Like, wow.
Right.
So, to answer the question more directly, and this is a number that Shopify has published, across the Shopify network. And so this is very diverse, but you could use it as a proxy for D2C. The average return rate is 18%.
Mm-hmm.
Now that takes into account the entire, breadth of brands. In apparel and footwear, we've seen, the return rates, it's not uncommon to see them in the 30 to 40% range. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you that, I mean, that's sort of a mind-boggling statistic if you think about it, right? And you think about, a third of all the items that you pick, pack, and ship out of your warehouse every day, you're going to have to handle again, right? That you're not done with these things. They're going to come back in individual shipments. Some of them, they're going to get shipped to you. They may not even be eligible for return. You have no idea the condition these items are in. And now you have to have a process set up to accept, to just take them into your warehouse, open the boxes, figure out what the hell's inside, disposition them, and for some of them, get them ready to, sell again. This is a complex and costly part of retail. And for the folks that are selling primarily D2C, man, this is a big cost, right? Because we're all competing in this world against Amazon, who's made returns free. And not only have they made returns free, but if you bought something on Amazon today and you went to return it, what you would find is 4 or 5 in-person options that they're going to promote ahead of printing a label, right? They're going to say, go to Whole Foods. They're going to say, go to Kohl's. Go to an Amazon store if there's one nearby. Go to an Amazon locker. Go to the UPS store. Oh, and if none of those work for you, then print a label. And the reason why Amazon's doing that is that those are far more cost effective for them, because when you bring it to Whole Foods or you bring it to Kohl's, they can then aggregate the items together before they ship them. When you print a label and drop it in, a carrier, drop box, there's no opportunity for cost savings for them. And Happy Returns, was founded with the same principle of like, wow, can we make this simple change to the physics of returns where we stick multiple items in the box rather than individual shipments, and then pass that cost savings on to retailers. And so, for returns by mail, which is, as I said earlier, that's the only option right now for shoppers when retail's closed. There is no way to save money there other than getting lower rates. But for our core business, which involves the return bar network, those same, application of physics apply.
And so on that note, in a normal landscape, post COVID, for your customers, what % of the returns are by mail versus, done by store, at a Happy Returns return bar?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think really speaks to, kind of the future of life post COVID. So, in the last month that we were fully operational, February, the average number, for retailers that worked with us and offered returns by mail and returns in person, the average percent of returns in person was 46%. So almost half of the returns are coming in person. When you unpack that and you ask, well, why is that? One is, as we've grown the network, we now have, 700 places where people can do these drop-offs. But when you ask shoppers, like, why are you now bringing it to Happy Returns versus the mail? It's just the hassle and weight of, printing labels, of, wrestling with packing tape and, doing, we call it the arts and crafts project, right? Like, oh, great. Print this thing, fold it or cut it, now put it on the, tape the box, tape the label on. Then I need to go figure out, is this UPS or USPS or FedEx, and drop it off. And then as a consumer, my reward for this is, I can check that box, and now I need to put another task list, task on my list, which is go check my credit card statement for the next 3 weeks.
Right.
No one wants to do that, right? And so that's why we're seeing that adoption of returns in person. A Happy Return is box-free, label-free, immediate refund or exchange. It's similar to, hey, I bought this online and I'm returning it to the retailer store, which is, that was sort of the central learning of the, where our business started, how it looked to Nordstrom Rack, was if you give online shoppers the choice, they overwhelmingly prefer to return in person. And, it's can we apply that same idea to building a third-party network that accepts returns across retailers, right? And so, it might be that I've got an Everlane return and a pair of Rothy's and a dress from Revolve. Wow, now I can do them all at one place with no printing and no box and no label. Sign me up.
So we actually had a question come in while you were answering that. I think you touched on some of the question. What are some of the main pain points of the return process from both the consumer, and the retailer point of view? On the consumer side, you were saying, the printing of the label, packing back up the item, and then waiting, for that refund. I know as a shopper myself, I would love the refund to be instantly, and I'd walk out of my apartment to go get that refund. So that immediate gratification. Are there any other, pain points you'd like to comment on the consumer side and that of the retailer? The retailer, you've mentioned a lot of the reverse logistics issues and expenses, but any other comments on that note?
Yeah. So on the shopper side, another one that we hear about frequently and that our software attempts to address is this idea of an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So often an exchange, if you bought something online, involves two transactions. This idea of ship it back to us, and then in 2 to 3 weeks, when someone at the warehouse opens the box and checks this in, you'll get your money back. But in the meantime, please spend more money with us to buy the thing you want.
Right.
I mean, that's barbaric. Let's just be honest, right? Nobody wants that. Like, wait, let me get this right. This thing didn't work, and now I need to spend more money and trust you that, now I have these two tasks, my order coming in and the refund that I get. No one wants that. And so, what our software focuses on is trying to have both those happen in one transaction and trying to make it as simple as possible. So there's a concept that, that we sell called one-click exchanges, which is, tell us what you're returning and why you're returning it. Thing is that you would want, and so the example I used, if it's too small, let's find the bigger size. Oh, you didn't like it? Here are the other colors it comes in, right? To make it as easy as one click and you're done. So I'd say that that's one piece which is missing from some of the friction points that we talked about. On the retailer side, any conversation with retailers about returns, within 5 minutes of starting, people are, somebody says something like this, like, oh, you want a really happy return? Just make this problem go away, right? That would make me happy. And we say, well, we're not magicians, but we certainly can help you turn those returns into exchanges. And that's the only way that we can help, make returns go away, is if you can retain that revenue. And so people say, okay, great, help me with that. And then for retailers, it's really, about improving the shopper experience. I mean, everyone in retail is also a shopper, and they've all experienced this, and they all, everyone would like to solve that. Lower my costs, right? This is eating me alive, this idea that I have to pay for all of these returns. And because I sell online, this rate is so high. Anything you can do, Happy Returns, to help me lower the costs. And then finally, and I think this is new in the last probably 18 months, is just this recognition that e-commerce has a huge impact on the planet. And all of these boxes, coming into my house and potentially going out as returns, really, they're generating, lots of shipping, which is lots of greenhouse gas, and lots of cardboard, which, we all used to feel good about putting the cardboard in the recycling bin. Oh, this is going somewhere, and I know it's going to be used again. China no longer buys our trash. And so what's happening is all that cardboard is going straight to the landfill. And so there's I think, a recognition on both sides. There's got to be a better way. And so, what we do to try to practically address that is two things. One, we talked about aggregation, right? When you have, more items in the box, you just have fewer shipments. And then the second is all the shipping we do, from the return bars to our processing hubs, and then from the hubs back to the retailers, is done in reusable totes. And those reusable totes, they look kind of like a soft cooler that you might take to the beach, all made out of recycled plastic, can be reused upwards of 100 times. And so, you just think about the impact of all those boxes that don't need to be used for shipment because I went and dropped it off and it was shipped in a reusable tote. Huge impact on, the planet. It's just less waste, right? And less greenhouse gas in these individual, one-by-one shipments going back to the retailer.
No, that's extremely interesting. And, coming into 2020, sustainable business practices was one of our main themes in all of our research. In our, 10 trends for 2020 report, sustainable business practices was one of our top themes. So that makes a lot of sense. And, we had discussed kind of what the future of returns looks like. And I think what you were just discussing, aggregating returns, more sustainable packaging, and sourcing of the reverse logistics can help combat those costs, as well as, the emissions. Do you see any other trends or themes coming out of this that are going to impact the future of returns?
Yeah, I think so. We've covered a lot of the big themes, but I mean, to kind of give it a bit of a framework, if you think about what I believe the impact of COVID ultimately will be, it's going to accelerate this push to e-commerce. And things that we used to buy in person, I think we will it's easier, it's safer, for me to buy this and have it shipped home. And, more e-commerce means more returns. And in an environment where, retailers are expected to foot the bill, I think there's going to be much more focus on the cost side, right? And so, a world in which retailers, I think we will find a world where retailers will use the cost of returns to customers to drive behavior. And so I believe that later this year, we're going to see lots of retailers say, I know I have to have a free return option. The free return option is to my stores or to a third-party network like Happy Returns, where it's cheaper. If you want to return by mail, fine, but I'm going to charge you. And so the idea of, free returns used to be free returns by mail. I think I could see that ending and retailers starting to charge for returns by mail. And I think that'll just accelerate this idea of, returns into networks, either retailer stores or third-party networks, where that aggregation can happen for cost savings primarily, but also the sustainability benefits that we talked about.
Got it.
Oh, and then one other is just this focus on exchanges, right? I think it's just better to do, your return and your exchange in one transaction rather than forcing the shoppers to do them in two. And so I think that'll just become table stakes. And software is the way to do that, right? Not call customer service and talk to someone and convince them to trust you, but just a self-service experience that intelligently promotes a purchase. The same way, by the way, and this is the principle of how our software is designed, is if you walked into a store to do a return, the store associate would not say, oh, Stephen, great, let me get you your money back. They'd say, oh, I'm sorry it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? And then depending on your answer, they would try to say, oh, well, if it didn't work out from a size perspective, let's get you into something that fits. Or, oh, I get it that you didn't like the way it looked on you. We have some other options. Let's take a look around the store, right? Because they wouldn't want you to leave the store without trying to turn that return into an exchange. Same principle applies with regard to our software and the design of promotion of exchanges.
To that point, well, I'm going to pause there and encourage everyone to continue to submit questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We've received some great questions, and please feel free to continue to submit. So David, to that point, you talked about implementing a automated customer service tool for returns. So which departments within retailers, within the organization, are you finding to be the proponents of a change in returns? Has it been kind of consistent across different retailers and brands? And kind of how do you see the professionals and companies that stand to benefit?
Yeah, great question. So when we start working with retailers, and I'd say this has changed a bit over time, we used to come in most frequently through marketing and customer experience that we're worrying about how can I take this pain point, returns, and turn it into something delightful. Over time, and I think especially now, it's more the finance team which is driving this, where they're saying, hey, we got to do something about this, right? The free returns via the mail is no longer sustainable for this company when we're fighting for survival. I don't want to have to impose penalties. I know I want a free return option. So maybe that free return option can be returns to my stores or return to a third-party network. And the second piece is this idea of make it easy to exchange and your exchange rate will go up. I mean, that's just, that's a super logical conclusion that everyone reaches. So, finance is certainly involved, focused on the lowest possible cost. Customer experience is certainly involved. And marketing, and this one's really counterintuitive. So hopefully this will make sense to folks listening, but no retailer wants to promote their returns policy or their return process, right? Because no one wants to think about that, especially when you're buying something. No one says, hey, if it doesn't work, return it. That said, what our brands have found is that when they make returns easy, shoppers are more likely to buy with them, right? They're more likely to try categories that maybe they've never tried before. Their checkout, their order size increases. And again, it's counterintuitive. Like, why would I want to make returns easier? I'm trying to get rid of these things. Well, if you make it easy, customers will shop more. And when you think about, the success stories in retail, right? If you think about Amazon or Zappos or Nordstrom, what's the common theme they all have? It's about putting the customer experience first. And everyone has a story about, wow, you know, I couldn't believe that Nordstrom took my return, or I couldn't believe how easy Zappos made it. You know, I bought 10 pairs of shoes and I kept one and there was nothing. You know, it's all about removing that friction that creates loyalty. And so, you know, from a marketing perspective, our goal, and, you know, we talk about this openly, is we want every website in America to say, you know, free shipping and happy returns, because we want happy returns to mean problem solved, friction free.
And could you just, you know, you mentioned some of the characteristics of a great experience. Can you put that into a real life perspective and share a case study or best practice from one of your experiences?
Yeah, so I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more. Our website, we have a blog section in the retailer version of our website, which has some great case studies. Rothy's, which is a fast growth, direct-to-consumer women's shoe business out of San Francisco. There's a great case study there about how they increased their exchange rate. Cuts Clothing, which is a men's t-shirt company. There's a great case study about reducing cost. Draper James, which is an awesome brand. It's Reese Witherspoon's apparel line. They're another case study that you can find on our website, which is really all about trying to create consistency in the return and exchange process, because they've got stores, they have their online site as well. And so those are great resources. Right now, we also have a blog series that is all about COVID. And it's, you know, there's one blog which is just sort of, you know, things that we're doing in our business, but then there's also kind of best practices around operations in this time, best practices around, you know, customers. And, you know, like everyone, we're adjusting to the new world, and I don't think we have all the answers. I certainly wouldn't pretend to. You know, we're in this sort of like known unknown period, to borrow Donald Rumsfeld's framework, but we're at least trying to say, hey, these are things that we have observed that seem to be working on the operations side, on the marketing side, and hopefully there's some utility in those.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I encourage everyone to check those case studies out. They're super informative. And just to wrap up here, we had a few questions come in. So in addition to some of the digital native companies that you work with, how many traditional brick and mortar retailers do you serve? And which are your largest return borrow locations in addition to Bed Bath & Beyond?
So I'll tackle the second one first. So on the location partner side, our biggest single partner is Cost Plus World Market, which is a division of Bed Bath & Beyond. We also work, and so we're in 275 Cost Plus World Market stores. We work with PaperSource, which is a longstanding partner of ours. They have about 130 stores open now, and just prior to COVID, they bought out the leases of about another 30 stores of one of their competitors that went bankrupt, Papyrus. And so when retail reopens, we'll be in all of those 30 new PaperSource locations. We're in about 50 Simon Mall properties. And one of the most exciting areas that we're starting to grow in is in offices. So, you know, I bought this online, I go to work, and I may be able to return this now at my office location.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I think, you know, is another one of those where if you think about the future, gosh, if I didn't have to make a separate trip out and I could do this at work.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a pilot going on with CBRE, the big real estate company, and their CBRE host division, which is providing the sort of concierge-like services for some large office complexes. We're also working with a co-working facility called the Riveter. We're in about a half dozen Riveter locations, which, you know, is just another tenant or, you know, amenity for the folks that use their co-working facilities. On the first question, you know, we work with, and it's interesting, when we got into the business, all of our retailers were pure plays, meaning, you know, online only. But if you look at what's happened over time, you know, Everlane, you know, they started out, they had one store, you know, in Soho, and now they've got 5 or 6 stores, right? And same thing with Rothy's, you know, small store in San Francisco as a test case, and now Rothy's has 4 or 5. Untuckit, which is a brand we work with, I think they have upwards of 80 stores at this point. Steve Madden is a new customer of ours. Steve Madden's got, you know, plenty of stores. And so what I think, you know, in that sort of, you know, for an omni-channel retailer, I think where we apply is this idea of 2 things. One, the idea that people are going to have a Macy's like, you know, 700 doors and be everywhere. I don't think that that's part of the future of retail anymore. And so, you know, if you are Everlane, there are going to be markets where we have locations where you're never going to have a store, right? You know, and so can we support your customers that are in those markets that are not perhaps core, but you know, but where you still have sales, right? So Everlane's going to have a store in Brooklyn, great, you know, but they're not in Pittsburgh where we've got 6 locations, right? So I think that's one. And then the other is just, and this is again more nuanced, but you know, there's some retailers that we're going to be launching with post-pandemic, which I can't talk about yet, but that have store networks and have had established store networks. And one of the things we've heard from them is, you know what, I don't actually want these internet returns in my stores, right? These internet returns, it may be that I don't even carry this product in my store. And so there's this interesting, different problem that we're helping solve, again, through software and reverse logistics, which is, I might not even want this stuff in my stores. Yes, I want the traffic. I want the customer to be able to come into my stores, but I don't want this onesie twosie internet stuff because now I have to create a separate section of my store and I have to merchandise this. You know, we've all seen this, right? You walk into Nordstrom where things are, you know, merchandised down to the square inch, and yet there in the corner is this rounder where items are organized by size and there's one of them. Right. And when you ask a store associate about it, they're like, yeah, those are the internet returns. Right.
Yep.
And so I think for a lot of retailers, especially in, you know, a world where physical store footprints are smaller, they don't even want the stuff in the store. Right. They want the traffic, but they don't want the stuff. And so can we have your returns provide, you know, software to power buy online, return to store, and then the reverse logistics to come get the items that they don't want and get those back in a cost effective way.
Correct. And that's like distributing them to their warehouses, fulfillment centers, or anything that's
you got it. You got it. Right. So the next best place to sell this thing might not be that store. It might be, you know, great, let's get it back to our fulfillment center, you know, because there's a demand for this product elsewhere.
Got it. So just in the essence of time, I think we're going to wrap it up here. And, you know, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be posting the recorded webinar on our website, Coresight.com, under the events section. So if you want to share, or, you know, if you didn't catch a few parts of the webinar, feel free to check that out. And just want to say thank you, David, for your time today. This was super interesting. I'm excited to see how things develop with Happy Returns during this environment and post-COVID. So hopefully we'll have you on again. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and participating, and hope to see you all next week.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to be here.